If you want a great outcome, you follow a system and the results will happen. AI is not a panacea. Think about the AI as it's the end in itself. Well, it's a new tool that we have. The reasons why companies fail is actually very intuitive. There are some attributes you can even test from the resume itself. Then there are some you test in person. Every quarter you need to assess your talent and rate them.
A lot of Indian companies build great products, but then GTM is where there is some sort of a challenge in understanding the geography. What do you do to get the sort of right optimal customer? Is there like a strategy to it?
The way you should start, and the right way, the wrong way. The wrong way is people will go and hire a VP of sales. If the VP of sales is really good, they're probably running sales at a larger company, making good commissions there.
What was the point in time that you realized that, hey, you want to start up by yourself and you want to go on this journey?
Hello. Before we get started with this episode, I quickly wanted to share that we are now a part of the Zerodha Media Network. Thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host, Jibraj. And today is an extremely special episode because we kick off the Bay Area leg of the podcast. The objective here is to host founders of Indian origin who are doing incredible work in the Bay Area and have been here for the last couple of decades. And today, this episode is very special because the man in front of me has built 2 unicorns in the past, one of which has gone public, and now he's building another company. Join me in welcoming Mohit Aron, who's previously built Nutanix, Cohesity, and now on his third journey. Thank you so much, Mohit, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me here.
Mohit, your story is incredible in the sense that a Chandigarh grew up kid goes to IIT Delhi. Then he comes to the US and for 14 years is doing mostly technically strong work. 5 years out of which gets spent in sort of grad school, post which you work at Google, you're very technically strong. And then you go ahead and found this company called Nutanix, right? Which is now like $20 billion, perhaps the largest success from this Indian cohort of folks that built a really successful company. And then in 2013, you go from CTO and founder to CEO and founder. You build a really large enterprise. And now a year back, you go ahead and start something by yourself. Where I'm getting at is, what is it in you that wants to start companies? You've talked about, putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, ownership, but what is it that you find attractive about starting up? And then how do you be successful each time you start? If you can address this heads on, that'll be a great starting point.
Thank you for asking me that question. I think different people are driven by different motivations. Personally, for me, number one, I love to build. Right, I love to build something that, in my mind at least, will change the world, and so that is one driver. The second is that I like being in an uncomfortable zone. The minute things become too comfortable, somehow I'm just not wired to accept that, because it tells me that I'm not learning anymore, I'm not growing anymore, right? And so the best place to be uncomfortable is to, do startups. Yeah. And when you do a company, a new startup, it's you're probably doing something that no one has done before. You're probably going against, big competitors who might be doing something somewhat similar, but also somewhat different. And so it really makes you uncomfortable, right? And so that is some of the things that drive. And then eventual satisfaction that comes from building something. I mean, you referred to Nutanix. I think the way the world has changed as a result of that technology, I watch it with some satisfaction. Then my next company, Cohesity, which is yet private, but hopefully sometime in the near future, maybe next year, hopefully will go public. And it's not just a unicorn, right? Nutanix is what we call a decacorn.
Yeah,
it's more than a $10 billion.
Yeah, it's like $19 billion in market.
That's right. And we hope that Cohesity will also get there, right? So some of the things that I drive satisfaction from. So building such companies, you take over huge competitors who were riding that space, and now you show people a new way of doing things, and the satisfaction that comes from that. So it's part of like, people like to ask me, why don't you just go around sailing the world or something? I'm like, I'm actually enjoying this more than that.
Sure.
So that's why I do.
And that's incredible to hear. And as you mentioned, and rightly so, right? I mean, starting companies is one thing, but doing it predictably well and into the extent and magnitude that you have is a different skill altogether. Talk to us that now that you're on a third journey, is there Like, is there a template in your mind that these are like 3 things, 5 things, or foundational things that from your vantage point, are necessary for a successful company?
Yes, I actually have a framework, and a lot of founders come to me for advice, and I give them the same framework, and I try to explain it in layman terms. I'll start by this. Often when companies fail, don't we feel like we're watching either on TV or we know about a company failing? Don't we all feel that, hey, I could have told that founder that this is not working like a successful idea or a successful company. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of times the reasons why companies fail is actually very intuitive. It's just that the founder decided not to, pursue the red flags early enough. Sometimes because they're emotional, sometimes for other reasons. But the framework I built will really bring forth those red flags and put them in your face. So without further ado, let's talk about that framework. Yes. So roughly the framework, I call it a hypothesis document. So you're literally building a hypothesis on why your company will be successful, right? So unless you have a hypothesis, how can you go out, spend 5 years in the world, and then find out the hard way that this is normally successful? At least you need to make a case, right? That's what a hypothesis is about, right? So the hypothesis, it's literally in the form of a document. So you write a hypothesis document that contains 4 sections. The first section is your elevator pitch. And I literally mean that if you get into an elevator with your prospective customer, what are you going to say to that customer in less than 5 minutes that will pique their interest and have them try your product from then onwards, take the next steps, right? What are those words? And it's amazing how people will go spend, 20 minutes talking about what they do, but they can't crispify it into 5 minutes, right? So what is that elevator pitch? The second part of the hypothesis document is what I call the minimum lovable product, right? Minimum and lovable. Yeah. Now you might have heard the term minimum viable product. Viable is very subject to interpretation. Anything that you think is viable can be viable, right? But lovable is something that the customers would love. What's the minimum that you can build that the customer would love? And you need to define that, right? So you understand precisely what you're going to build as your first cut. Now, this is where a lot of founders, in the future, I'll be doing this and that. And I'm like, dude, that future will never come unless the first thing that you ship hits the ground running, strikes the oil. And that's the notion of a minimum lovable product. So you literally write down what the product is going to have, what features it's going to have when you first start selling. Unless you can define that crisply, it's always going to be, right, wishy-washy, let's also try this, let's also try that. So that's the minimum lovable product. And the whole company then mobilizes around that, hey, if it's not part of the minimum lovable product, we're not going to do it. And if it is, then we better make it great, polished, and lovable. Right? It needs to be lovable. So that's the second section. The third section is why would the company succeed? What are all the reasons you think this company would succeed? Right? What price advantages do you have? Right? Is it in an area which, is there a pain that you're solving? Right? We say that companies ought to solve a pain. They should be aspirin and not a vitamin. So why is it an aspirin and not just a vitamin? Why is it not just a good to have? What's the total market size? Right? So I have like a list of about 10 filters I use in this section. Sure. And you need to make a case for why this company would succeed. And any other reasons that you may think of, right? For instance, my former company, Nutanix, the reason it succeeded was, there was a big cost benefit. It was at least 1/3 the price of a competitive solution if you try to do something similar. Nutanix invented a technology called hyperconvergence, which brought compute and storage together in a world where networking speeds have really not improved drastically in the last 2 decades, when compute and storage speeds have. And so it made sense for compute and storage to come together and get the networking out of the way, right? Sure. So there itself, you're with the trends. The trends are supporting you. That's one of the reasons why Nutanix would form. Like that's the reason why it would succeed. That's one of the reasons. So anyway, in the third section, you write down all the reasons why it would succeed. Sure. If you are having a hard time finding a single reason why it would succeed, then you're going to just figure it out 5 years later. right? Some bozo, some VCs even want to fund you, right?
Yeah.
What do they know?
Yeah.
And now you're caught. This is what happens. You got the money from someone and you really don't know why the company would succeed and you're just spraying and praying. Well, the fourth section is even more important. So the first section was elevator pitch. The second section is what's the minimum lovable product. The third one is why would it succeed? And the last section is why would it not succeed? All the reasons that, so let's say I'm a founder, I'm probably drinking my own Kool-Aid. But I speak to you and you're like, dude, I don't think this idea is viable for this, and this reason. Well, those are the reasons why it would possibly not succeed.
Right.
And for every reason that someone or maybe you yourself come up with why the company won't succeed, you need to have rebuttals on why you think that reason can be either that's not a valid reason or how you will counter that reason. What are you going to do to counter that reason? So this forms a hypothesis, right? It has everything that you can use to prove that this company would succeed. And now that you have this sort of blueprint, it's now just a matter of executing it, right? So drawing an analogy, what people really do is, let's say you were to build a Burj Khalifa.
Yeah.
If you just go without any framework, any blueprint, any hypotheses, you start building the Burj Khalifa, it would probably topple one day, right? You had the vision to build the biggest whole world, but you didn't prove why it would succeed or why the reasons it might fail and how we would counter them. So this is basically what you have to do for companies. In a way, company is kind of like do Burj Khalifa, right? So you better put all the reasons why it would succeed and why it would not succeed and have ways to counter them, right? And what exactly the first product will look like. That's the minimum lovable product. What exactly will you say about the company, right? Why would you be able to attract the customers? So once you do this, it's a painful exercise, by the way. But once you've done this, the rest is just executing it.
That's amazing.
And that's basically what you do, right? So it's not luck. And then, I'm sure there are some companies that are successful because of luck, but then it's a lottery ticket, right? If you start 1,000 companies, maybe one would succeed. But you do it this way, there's far more predictability that it will succeed because you're conscious from the very get-go on what it is that you're doing and why would it succeed and what are the possible reasons why it would not. And you're always watching for how to counter them, right? And you do this, that's how you end up with successful assets.
That's amazing. I love that framework. Thank you so much for sharing. I think it'll be super helpful for early stage founders. I'm curious to understand, as a serial entrepreneur with 2 successes on your back, the third time around, is there any undue sense of pressure because you have all the ingredients otherwise, right? And now the odds for you to also build a large company are extremely high. But does that also create a sense of responsibility of why not, if not, right? And do you then be more careful about how you start, or is it again a very organic process and you embrace it at scratch zero?
So one answer to that is that follow the process and the results will happen.
Sure.
Right. So I'm always a believer. I actually want to draw an analogy that look at the traffic system in some places, like let's take Bangalore, for instance,
Sure.
right? The traffic system is a bit terrible.
Yeah.
And look at the traffic system. You're sitting here in California in the Bay Area, traffic is quite nice.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that it's the same people who would go to Bangalore and drive badly. And the same people would come here and drive well. So is it the people? It's actually not the people that bring about the outcomes.
Yeah.
It's the system. So if you want a great outcome, you follow a system.
Yeah.
Right. So I always say build the right system and the system will produce the outcomes. So one thing that gives me comfort that the outcomes will be great is I actually rely on the system. And once I'm following the system, I trust the system to produce the right outcomes. So that itself produces that so-called trust. Right. So that's one answer to your question. The second answer I just want to give to you that look, building companies is always hard. System or no system. And founders ought to do some mind work. Right. So I strongly advocate, that, a lot of people will not take care of their bodies, they not take care of their minds, and they do a startup. And I'm here to tell you that you may be in the pink of health when you started, but as you go along in this journey, somewhere you're going to burn out. So I strongly recommend that you take care of your wellness, which means that you should take care of your physical health, but also your mental health. In whatever way, right? They'll end up ways the word has mindfulness or what have you. I personally do yoga, right? So I follow some practices, but that also, brings you to the present. And if you're just constantly worrying about what might happen in the future, well, whatever you're worrying about will happen. Right? On the other hand, if you're focused on the present and you can calm your mind on not worrying too much about the future, then you can actually focus on what needs to be done. That's right. And you can more accurately follow that system that you built. Otherwise, you're trying to imagine that you're driving, but you're constantly worrying about an accident happening. Well, guess what? An accident will happen then. Right? On the other hand, if you're just focusing on your driving and not worrying about an accident, then you actually drive well. Same stuff.
That's amazing. I love that analogy. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to come to the most tectonic shift currently that we're going through in technology, which is AI. You've built companies over the last 2 decades, and you have this vantage point of being in the epicenter of innovation. Talk to us about where you see the world heading. What do you sort of want to share with founders in India building for the world or building locally as well from an AI lens? Because such technological shifts don't come very often, and we're fortunate to be in a time that we can witness it and be a part of it. So, what is your gut say about this and informed opinion?
So, I'll give a very balanced one, but I'll preface that by saying that this is my opinion, of course. Right? AI is this world is such a fast moving world that maybe I'm wrong. Like who knows? But I'll try.
Sure.
So the first thing is that yes, AI is a tectonic shift. And it's hard to imagine any area that will not be touched with AI. In fact, anything that is not embracing AI at this point is probably going to be in a year or two be considered backward. And as you can tell, I'm fond of drawing analogies. I'll draw another analogy, right? Imagine the time when maybe the car came, right? The car was invented. And that changed everything, right? People who were going on horses or were riding bicycles. Now there's another way. And anyone who was not embracing this new mode of transportation will probably be called backward in a few years, right? It's the same thing. So this new technology is going to touch all areas and all different kinds of, just name the industry and there will be an effect of AI. So that's one end. So, I don't think I've said anything that people, will dispute. But on the other hand, I also want to say that let's take a balanced approach. There's somehow people think that this is going to be taking away tons of jobs. Well, notice that when something new comes, when cars came, yes, it probably took away jobs, maybe of people who took care of horses, right, or at least reduced those jobs. But then it created jobs, related to cars.
Yeah.
So this is a shift in a similar fashion. So while it might change the nature of jobs, it'll create more jobs. So that's one. The second caution I would like to say is that AI is not a panacea. It's people sometimes think that it's just can do everything now. That's not possible. That's actually, I don't think that's true. There is still going to be fair bit of need for people who have the caliber to use the AI. We think about the AI as a means to an end and not the end in itself.
Sure.
Sometimes people confuse the two. They think it's the end in itself. Well, it's a new tool that we have. It's kind of like if you go fight a war, we suddenly have new ammo that we can use, right? And maybe we have a better chance to win the war. But somebody still has to fight the war, right? Maybe you can use this AI tool to fight the war. But the problem has to be relevant because the reason why we're fighting the war, right? Strategically, we have to still do some of the similar things. So I would like to caution on people who try to have too much of this FUD on AI that God knows what AI is going to do. I think it's a mixed approach that I have, a balanced viewpoint, where AI is a great thing that is happening. But at the same time, let's not be too paranoid about what AI might take away from us, right? Whatever little it takes away, it will also create new opportunities.
Absolutely. Well, that's amazing. I think that's as balanced as it gets and helps us with your vantage point. I want to get to the fact that, a lot of action is happening here, right, in the Bay Area. And now you've been here, I think, 95 to 25. So that's like 30 years. What is your thought on Indian founders building in the AI world from India? And where do you think the differential lies if you have to be here? Like, what is that delta like?
Yeah, so I came here in 95, yes, but not to the Bay Area. I was actually in Houston. I did university, right? So I actually, in my professional life, I have been here since 2000.
Okay.
So 25 years in the Bay Area. So I've seen the changes both in India as well as here. Look, I'll start by saying this. I don't think it was possible for a person like me at the time to have done a company in India for a variety of reasons. Number one, for people like me to do companies, you need venture capital support. Not all founders are born rich, so to say. And India had very little venture capital back then. The ecosystem for supporting companies was not there. So the only companies, very frankly, had everything was government. And then multinationals started coming. So only the big companies were there. The startups are a more recent phenomenon in India, right? So at least that now there's an increasing trend now. I think there are VCs in India. So the ecosystem in India is much more friendlier to people like myself when doing a startup in India. And also, I think some of the corporate ethics, I think the reason US is so advanced or was so advanced was because of its corporate culture. And that again has seeped to India bit by bit. I think let's agree that the corporate culture wasn't there. The corporate ethics weren't there. Even now, I think India started by embracing the B2C. So it was much easier to build e-commerce, companies. And that's because you're able to sell to individual consumers. But given some problems in the way you conduct B2B business, like let's say I said to a big customer and that customer refuses to give me money. Now the courts are a little bit, the India has long delays on how to collect monies and stuff. So it's very hard to do B2B businesses unless you have a government cloud, political connections. So those are still some challenges that remain. But overall, the trend is very good, where it's becoming increasingly simpler and easier for founders to set up shops in India. And we see examples, although I still see way more B2C examples than B2B examples. So that's a shift that has to happen. Yeah. And I'm fond of saying that the one thing that will make it all, very, very accessible is if the judicial system improves. Absolutely. And the cases become faster, right? The law is faster.
Ease of doing business.
Ease of doing business, exactly. Yeah. And when you're talking large numbers, look, if I'm doing a B2C company and one consumer is giving a hard time paying like 100 rupees or something, okay, it's just 100 rupees, right? I can write off that. But when it comes to bigger customers, when we're talking millions of dollars, then it becomes, there really is a hit if a few of my customers, do hocus pocus and refuse to pay, and the corporate ethics are not clean.
Sure.
And that's where we need the courts to step in and help. And so some of that cleanup still has to happen. There's a lot of improvements that have happened in India, and I go to India every year. And I can see the changes, but some work still remains. And I think the judiciary definitely needs to be way faster in doing what it does, especially to support the corporate culture.
Got it. Fair enough. Sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I think, again, it helps draw a parallel to where India needs to make, improvement. There are a couple of now software successes, and hopefully that can be replicated in the AI world as well. I'd love to understand on a talent level, right? Do you think there's a differential? Because we also keep hearing, and all of you folks who build like Nutanix, who built Cohesity, you've proven that Indian origin founders in the US have done well. And that's, of course, a very well-established sort of narrative. Talk to us about where maybe you have seen differential in your interactions with CEOs in India vis-a-vis your experiences here, and how Indian talent here has shaped. I think I'd love to get a sense from you on that.
Yeah, so I think these days the corporate CEOs and all, I think they've become quite westernized in India. So when we speak to them, I want to use the term dalagiri that was there a little bit earlier. I see much less, so it's much more professional. So that and the talent is India has premier institutes like the IITs. I'm from one of them, and so there's no doubt for talent. It's again goes back to the system. Yeah. Right. As the system improves, these people have more and more opportunities to showcase their talent. Right. And that's basically the case. Now, it is true that, and that's not just the US, but it's actually specific to the Silicon Valley. It was so much easier to do companies here. Yeah. Because no matter what company you do, you find pretty much all the talent here. You want somebody in manufacturing, well, they're here. You want somebody as software engineers, they're here. You want somebody building UX and UI, they're here. Right. Yeah. Now that is a unique thing that you don't find in too many other places of the world. And so, yes, India also had, by and large, that problem that in no one place you could find that level of talent. Bangalore might be an exception where you actually do find such talent. The challenges in Bangalore are some of the infrastructure challenges. I mean, even if you do find them, okay, are they close enough to your office? Because if they're taking like 2 hours to come to your office, could be a challenge. The other problem, I think now it's improving some, but was at least there, a few years back, was people tended to job hop a lot more in India than here. Like they would literally rise up the corporate ladder by job hopping and not so much by actually learning and growing, from a career perspective, from a knowledge perspective. And that becomes a challenge. So if you hire a senior person in India, that person likely is not that knowledgeable. They're more risen because of just these corporate jumps. So, and I'm speaking for myself, I like to hire more junior people because then I can, hire them and train them in India, as opposed to getting someone very senior and that person, is not quite that senior from a knowledge point of view, but just senior on paper. And so that challenge, I believe, still remains to some extent. And especially it becomes tough for me to deal with a senior person who's really not that senior.
Right.
So I'd much rather hire a junior person. So what I try to do is I'll hire 1 or 2 senior people who I can trust and then build a team of more junior people under them who we can then, train over time. So that's going to be my philosophy. In the US, on the other hand, you can actually get senior people and you can vet them, and it's way easier to find senior people in the US than I've generally experienced. My experience has been finding senior people and good senior people in India is hard. And it still continues to be that case.
Got it. Well, that's super interesting to hear. I think just the depth of the markets are different and longevity. So I guess some of these structural aspects remain a challenge, but I'm sure it's changing over.
I mean, it all changes, all improves, right, for the good. But these were some of the challenges that were there a few years back, and maybe some are still there now.
I want to touch upon 2 things that you did mention briefly, but maybe we can expand. One is just talent density, right? Like you've been in these tech premier hubs of, let's say, an IIT Delhi, and then in the Bay Area, then the Nutanix sort of mafia, right? All of you have gone on to build interesting, successful large ventures, and then so on and so forth. Can you talk about like the role of just surrounding yourself with like great people, and how has that tactically sort of shaped your thinking? And what does that mean for sort of young people watching, right? Who may not be in such perhaps dense institutions, yet they can learn from such experiences and maybe leverage it the way they'd like in their lives.
Yeah, so companies are all about people, not about AI. AI is just a means on that. Companies are all about people, right? And the more you can surround yourself with great people, the better are the chances that the company would grow. Right? And so I literally have a whole hiring strategy on what I use, and I even have a talent assessment strategy. And these are, I think, tactically 2 of the most important things you can do in a company.
Yes,
absolutely. So I think it is educational to start with the wrong way to hire, right? Because then I'll talk about how I've
absolutely
improved over time.
Yeah.
The wrong way to hire is you maybe have a recruiter, maybe not even that. I don't know. Then you say, well, I want to hire person code XYZ role. Hey, can you send me some candidates? So the person sends you a list of candidates, you start interviewing them, right? Your team spends a whole bunch of time interviewing whatever candidates they're sending your way. Then you just go hire. And this is very usual, by the way, and it is riddled with problems, right? So I'll start by the problems. So the first one is that you let the recruiters or whoever is generating the pipeline send whatever candidates your way. Now you're wasting time interviewing them, even their resume was kind of not a fit, right? And so that's a whole bunch of time wastage. I mean, every interview probably takes about 4 or 5 hours of people time, and you spend a lot of time. And then eventually, after spending enough hours, you're like, man, maybe I should just select. I'm losing time, whatever. And you'll end up hiring a suboptimal candidate. And the way the interview goes, by the way, is you'll ask the person, some in person, try to ask some questions or what have you, but you didn't have any preparation done. So you didn't really prepare what to ask, what to test for. So more or less, interviews tend to be more a chemistry match. So if I like you, I'm just going to hire you. That doesn't mean that you can do the job, but I just like you as a person, right? And then you discover later that the person is actually unable to do the job. And then, even that realization comes maybe in a year or so later. And then you try a little to fix that, and perhaps you just let it linger. Okay, what to do? But you wasted at least a year, if not more. So these are all wrong ways to hire. So now let's talk about how to do it in my mind, right? So whatever role you want to hire for, before you even look at the candidates, you build what I call hiring scorecards, right? So you determine what exactly are the competencies you look for, or attributes, if you will, right? So for instance, if I'm hiring a software engineer, maybe the person needs to have a great education pedigree. Maybe they should have worked at some great companies. Maybe they shouldn't have job hop. It's a red flag if they've been moving every 6 months from one job to another. What I'm trying to say is there are some attributes you can even test from the resume itself. Then there are some you want to test in person, right? Hey, can the person code well? Can they design well? Are they good at communication skills, right? Are they a good team player, right? And then, people can possibly fool you in an interview, but that's where the reference checks are for, right? So what you do is you prepare a bunch of attributes that you'll test for even before you meet the candidate. So I call that a pre-interview set of attributes, and I put that in a scorecard. So all these attributes are in scorecards. So that's 3 different scorecards. The first scorecard is what I call a pre-interview scorecard. So these are the bunch of competencies they need to meet before my team even interviews them. If a candidate is not even scoring high in that, why do I want to waste time in my team? It doesn't make sense. And I will even give this pre-interview scorecard to my recruiters that they need to rate it, vet it, and score it, and send it to me, showing why the candidate should be interviewed by us.
Right.
Because otherwise, recruiters feel like they've done their job if they've sent like 20 resumes to me every week.
Correct.
But if 18 of them are bad, they think they've done their job, but really what I'm getting out of them is 2 resumes. But if I give them this pre-interview scorecard, now they're forced to send me 20 good resumes. Right? So
you think they're
Exactly. And now there is a far higher likelihood that I'll be able to find a good candidate from this, as opposed to when there's an inflow of only 2 a week or something, right? So then we interview them. And while chemistry match is maybe one of the competencies, but there could also be 9 other competencies I'm looking for. And I'm forced, every person here is, when they do their interview, they're supposed to rate on those competencies, right? So now you're not just saying yes to the person just because you like the person, but you're saying yes to the person because you like them on those 10 competencies, right? Or in every interview, maybe you can test 3 or 4, and then different interviewers can overlap and then test different competencies with some overlap. But the bottom line is that you're trying to make a case on why the person can do the job by seeing the scores on each of the competencies. Now, we all know that not all candidates you're going to interview are 10 on 10. But at least when you hire the person, they should at least be, let's say, 8 out of 10. And the 2 out of 10 where they're missing on, you're going with your eyes open. You know that these guys are somewhat mediocre in these 2 attributes. And then you train them or what have you, right? You're going with your eyes open, as opposed to it being a complete surprise when they come in and they're like, oh, really? You can't even do this? You can't even do this? Right? And the last one is, of course, the reference checks. And the wrong way to do a reference check, well, first of all, the absolute wrong way is to not do any reference check. Then the second wrong way is, hey, I'm trying to hire so-and-so. What do you think? Is this a good guy? And the other side will say, yeah, great guy, hired. It's an absolute wrong kind of reference check. Because the reality is that nobody likes to speak about negatively about a person, right? Give you the red flags. So what you do is you don't do that. But you even write down the attributes you're looking for. Is the person good at coding? Taking the example of a software engineer. Is the person good at design? So everything that you care for, you put them down as separate attributes. And then every question you ask on a scale of 1 to 10. So is the person good at software engineering on a scale of 1 to 10? Now think about it. If I don't want to be negative, right, but I know the person is not good, I'll maybe say 6. Right? Now 6 is a failing score. I need to see 8 or higher. Right? But even if they give me 8, and so then I will ask, so what would make it a 9? Now they are forced to give me some red flags, right? And so now I can create a complete picture on what exactly the candidate is good at, and what exactly are sort of the red flags. And then based on that, I can decide whether I want to go forward with the candidate.
Yeah.
So this is a much better way to hire than you just like with those 20 bad resumes, and more likely than not, your candidate is not even a good fit from a resume perspective. But even if he or she is, you're like, oh, great person. I like the person, right? I like the way he talks. I can have beer with the person.
Correct.
It's an absolute wrong way to hire.
Yeah.
And this is why so many companies go down, because they keep ending up hiring bad people.
Yeah.
So you hire well, but let me also say upfront, despite all my years in industry, even I would say I have not found the perfect hiring method.
Yeah.
Right. There are going to be hiring mistakes. Sometimes you even take a bet. Right. Like I said, not everyone is going to be 10 on 10. Maybe I thought it was 8 or 10, but then I figured out those 2 or 10 are really hurting. Right. We thought we could improve the person in those 2 attitudes, but we can't. And those are showstoppers. Right. God knows, right? Maybe or we despite our best efforts, they actually did turn out to be somewhat less of what we figured out. Maybe they did the interview well. Talent assessment, right? Discipline. Every quarter you need to assess your talent, right? And rate them, and see if they're beating your bar. And then, roughly the litmus test is that would you hire them again, right? And the answer to that is no. Then you need to go about seeing how to fix it. And the last resort, of course, is to get rid of the person, which is very important actually, because otherwise they'll do so much damage.
Yeah.
Right. So tactically, people need to have these very two strong talent disciplines, both hiring and periodic assessments, and act according to them.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I think very tactically helpful and foundational. I think constantly the feedback I hear on the podcast from founders is that hiring remains to be that one challenge to be solved for. And I'm glad you've spoken about it in depth. I want to double click on the people aspect from a ability to dream and like sort of believe in yourself, right? Like I think one thing I've noticed, and I've only been here 2 weeks, is that the fact that around you people have built multi-billion-dollar enterprises increases your faith and confidence in being able to execute. And the fact that you have built, 2 enterprises, and before that also you've been surrounded by great people, how has that shaped sort of confidence? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, it can go both ways, right? If there's lots of people around me that have built successful stuff, then you may be self-doubting yourself,
Yes.
right? Can I measure up to them?
Yeah.
So I won't necessarily worry too much about who surrounds you, right? I would worry about whether I'm following the right system, and that whether that system would make me successful.
That's awesome.
And so the nice thing about having people around you that have done this is that you can show that system to them and have them critique it, right? And they can say that I like this about the system and I don't like about that system. But otherwise, just having those people around you is not a recipe necessarily a guarantee of any success.
Sure.
Right? Maybe they look at your idea and they're like, I can do this better than this guy. So it goes both ways. But I would rely on that system. What exactly is the system you're following?
Yeah.
And have people you trust who are good, who've done this before, actually affect the system. And then you follow the system, and the system will produce outcomes. That's the way I think it goes. Right?
That's awesome. Yeah, I think just the input focus on your end is amazing. I want to get a bit more, I know I've gone all over the place to start off with, but as we sort of go towards the end, maybe specifically to the Cohesity journey and the Nutanix journey, right? If you can maybe spend one question each, but I can understand what was the ingredient to sort of lay the foundation well. These were also sort of category creating at the time, right? There was no precedent to begin with. And many of our sort of listeners may not be completely familiar with the sort of story of the scale and success. So if you can, help us with maybe first Nutanix, your role in it, considering it was, combining multiple things like compute, network, storage, all of it. How did that play out? And then what was the journey to sort of, in a category creating play, how did enterprise sales happen?
Right.
I'd love to understand from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take them one by one.
Yes.
So, again, the company has to, in my mind, do something disruptive, something that has sort of never been done before. So it has to solve a real problem, has to be aspirant, that sort of stuff, right? So I saw the makings of, in the case of Nutanix, there are multiple indications. One is, of course, that the storage and compute speeds were increasing tremendously, but networking was not. But how did I even arrive at the problem? right? The problem I saw in my days at Google, I was a staff engineer at Google, and Google realized early on that it's going to be hard for them to keep buying storage from outside. So they built an internal one called the Google File System. I was one of the lead developers there. But they started using it initially, just like people used to use regular storage, right? If you go to any storage company, you put storage on one side, you put compute on the other side, you connect that with the network. That's how you use it. So what Google did, it built its own Google File System, but it put it on one side, put the computer on the other side, connected it to the networking, and started using it. Then they realized that network, right? And so what they did is they tried to merge the compute and the storage sides, right? So in Google's world, they would have their whatever indexing search algorithms, that compute running on the same server as the storage, right? And that was a crude form of hyperconvergence, what came to be known as hyperconvergence. But I realized that if this is relevant for Google, it's probably going to be relevant soon for the world outside. The only problem was that while Google sort of is its own customer, right? So the compute and the storage can sit on the same server and run together. That's not how the world operates. In the rest of the world, the storage is like a first-class citizen. It's an industry of its own. The compute is an industry of its own. And you try to put them two together, they'll blame each other, and anything goes wrong, right? It's your problem, your problem. So how do we solve that problem? So Google could do it because Google is its own customer. And the two teams that work on both sides are like working in the same company, but that's not the case in the external world.
Right.
So the intuition then, the vision behind all this was that, well, this is important for the world. Here's the reason why this is important. Get this hyperconvergence done. But what is the solution to solve this problem? And that was through virtualization. So you put like a virtual, a layer between the two, between compute and storage, and that is what came to be known as Nutanix. Right. So that's how you draw, and then you of course build the hypotheses. Is this a big enough market? Is there really a pain, and so on and so forth? And what's the first step to? What's the first product, minimal lovable product that was in Nutanix's case, VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure. The big pain we saw was people were trying to build these virtualization firms for VDI. But the cost of a virtual desktop was more expensive than even a physical laptop. So it was dead and alive, right? So Nutanix, since it dropped the cost so much, the VDI became feasible. And so that's how we entered the market, right? So the whole case has to be made, a whole hypothesis has to be made. Why would this company become successful?
And why the customers become
and why would customers come? So that was the case for Nutanix. For Cohesity, something similar. Everyone needs backups.
Before you get to that, can you also talk through your thought process to go from Nutanix to Cohesity? Like, what was the point in time that you realized that, hey, you want to start up by yourself and you want to go on this journey? Was it an inflection point? Was it an instance? I'd love to understand that.
Let's just say that if you roughly map the world of data into an iceberg, right? The tip of the iceberg, the part above the surface of water, is what I would refer to as primary data, or production data. And Nutanix operates in that space.
And then
there is a second, which is much larger, which is called secondary data. And these are your backups, but it's not just your backups. It's test and development, it's analytics, everything that's the second touch of data, so to say, is secondary data. And so I've solved the tip of the iceberg, and there's a whole big problem sitting underneath. And like I said in the beginning, I'm a builder. So I saw this opportunity and follow through with another company, and that's the genesis of Cohesity. So that's kind of how that came about. And now that I've done both, this company, even though I'm in stealth, I'm not really talking about it, I can tell you it's not in either of those areas.
Fair enough. Is it safe to assume it's in AI?
Like I said, anything that's not going to be using AI. Again, AI is a tool, right? It's not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. So this company it's an enabler. And so this company is going to use AI as an enabler.
That's amazing.
That goes without saying. Even at Cohesity, we have a bunch of AI. So, earlier we used to call ourselves as data management company. Now it's become a security and a data insights and a data management company. So over time, the vision evolves, so say. So, that has also happened at Cohesity. They're also using a bunch of AI. There's a project I did there called Gaia, which brings generative AI to Cohesity. right? So that's even possible there. Yeah. So yeah, but that's
the story of
Nutanix.
And
Nutanix story was a little bit similar.
Yes.
I think that secondary stuff, even though it needed to be disrupted, and everything was running in different silos, right? Backups were different, and test and dev was different, and cloud was different, and analytics was different. And the big vision was to bring them on one platform, and hence was Cohesity born. And even within backups, for instance, people were using like 10 different products, and every product did not scale out in a Google-like way. So I thought even in backups, I can actually bring so much by bringing Google-like technology there, right? That can scale. And then on the same platform, you can do way more. You can make it act like a filer. It can also do analytics for you and way more. So that became the vision behind Cohesity. So the same platform could take care of all your secondary. Got it. That was the big vision.
That's amazing. That's so super interesting to hear. From an enterprise sales lens, and you're considering that you've been, in that space for decades now. Are there any significant learnings on what do you get right? Like, what do you do to get the sort of right optimal customer? Is there like a strategy to it? Because again, the narrative is that a lot of Indian companies build great products, but then GTN is where there is some sort of a challenge in understanding the geography, etc. What are your learnings on that?
Yeah. Well, so that actually is not just a problem in Indian founders, it's a problem globally. Because most founders, let's face it, they probably start like a technical founder.
Yes.
Right? Don't know anything about sales or how to sell.
Yeah.
And I was kind of in the same boat and made my own share mistakes. So I can share a few tidbits on what people can do. Well, first, it starts by your hypothesis document. The hypothesis itself should make a case for why this is sellable.
Sure.
You don't want to figure it out on the fly. So often founders make the mistake of building some cute technology, but they don't have a hypothesis on why would customers actually need it, right? So they're trying to make that case on the fly. It's going to be tough. And as part of that, then if you do that, then what's going to happen is keep making architectural changes to accommodate for what customers really want. And then your whole product becomes a bunch of patchwork and it's just not going to work out. But if you have a clear idea of what really is the pain, why would people pay for it? Then it's much easier, right? So assuming you've done the hypotheses and you have a fair idea of why the customers need this product, then the way you should start, and this is again the right way, the wrong way. The wrong way is that people will go and hire a VP of sales, right? Well, let's face it. If the head of sales, a VP of sales, if that person is really good, they're probably running sales at a larger company, right, making good commissions there. Why would they come to your piddly little startup that has no sales and run the show for you? They're like, what do I do here? I don't have anything to sell. What should I sell to? One customer? So you actually not start with the big guy. You want to start with, more junior people in sales, right? So what you do is, and one more thing I would say is that when you're in the initial stages, no matter what your hypothesis is, you will figure out things along the way. So the founders have to be extremely involved in sales, right? Or at least one of the founders has to be involved, because the founder has the ability to kind of change the messaging, tweak the product. If you just give it to the sales guy, okay, now you go sell. The sales guys will regurgitate the same words that you told them.
Yeah.
And if those words are not landing well, that what? So initially the sales has to be very founder-led.
Sure.
And the founder has to come bring that feedback, tweak the product or tweak the messaging or what have you. And the sales guy might be going along, but really the initial sales are all done by the founders. So that's the first way. The second way is, the second thing is that your initial sales guy should not be a VP or whatever big guy. What you want to do is you take a very promising low-level manager, right? Maybe a district manager, which is the first tier of sales. Give him or her a little bit of a promotion. So bring them on as a director of sales. And you bring them, remember, I'm a founder. I know I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling and meeting customers myself. So I probably want that person to be closer to my geography, right? So that I can initially, when I'm going and refining this message, talking to customers, I can do it much more easier. As opposed to, I hired my first sales guy in New York. Now, every time there's a customer, I have to fly 6 hours, right? That is a problem. I'd much rather hire someone in California
Sure.
And so I do all the legwork here. And then by the time I realize, okay, this is what I need to say. These are the words that will fly, and here are the minimum sort of features, because I only so far I have a hypothesis. Maybe I think that these 10 things are needed, but the customer tells me you also need these 2 other things. Right? It's very interesting when what you learn when people have to actually tell you. Right? When they part with their checks, they will really tell you why they will part there with their checks. These are the exact sort of features, right? And so I want my initial sales guys to be closer to me, if at all possible, and somewhat junior. So I would hire a district manager in California, right? Maybe make them a director of sales. Just that's an incentive for them, and then have them initially do, go along the beam, but also hire the first few sales reps underneath them, right? So now I have California going, right, or one territory going, right? Then if this is sort of successful, I would hire now in a somewhat different geography. Now I also refined the message some, so I'm confident I go to the southern US. I will not go to an international territory. That's another mistake. People see like, oh, some customer is interested in Australia, let's sell to Australia. Big mistake. No. You want to first grow as much close to home as possible, right? So you do something similar in, let's say, southern US or what have you. And then you do it in the eastern US, right? And then once you have 2 or 3 of these teams, which so far they're all reporting to you, now you're like, okay, you want to place a person on top. So you take your best leader and you put their hat in the ring. At the same time, you're also interviewing candidates from outside. They came, but they're really not good. They will not know what to do. So they're now building a team that's not that good. Right. So now you have a total shit show in your sets. And this is unfortunately a problem that I see quite often. You need to be very careful on how you build your go-to-market, right? And then there is a whole science on how you actually manage your pipeline and blah, 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 but that comes later.
Sure.
Initially, this is how you start.
Got it. Awesome. So founder-led sales followed by just ensuring that proximity and then hiring back. Yes. No, this is very, very interesting. I think towards the end, I want to target some, again, like final learnings. I'd love to understand from you if there are things that you discovered about yourself through the entrepreneurship journey that you didn't know or earlier. What does that look like?
A lot. I've discovered a lot of things. It's a lonely job, and it teaches you a lot about what you don't know. There's just people who feel they know everything. I feel pity for them because there's so much you don't, even after doing all these companies. I now realize how much is there out there to learn. And so anyone who thinks they know it all or whatever is just so wrong. I'm nowhere close to knowing it all. It's just an ocean of knowledge that's out there. There is that humility, first of all, that you're a pretty little thing in the whole grand scheme of things. So never make the mistake of thinking that you know it all. Second, never make the mistake of thinking that just because you've done one company, the second one is going to be a breeze. No, every company brings its own challenges. But of course, there are learnings that you can apply, right? And hopefully some of the things can be made easier because of those learnings. But by no means you can assume that things that will be easy. Every company has challenges, a different set of challenges, perhaps, right? Depends on the domain, depends on the time. Like we discussed now, there's AI, so there's AI, level challenges, there's challenges. And the job of the founder is to basically imagine you've been dealt a bunch of cards and you have to play the best game. And this game changes, every few months. And now you have a different set of cards and you play the next game, right? You can't always win. Sometimes you take 1 or 2 steps backward, but then you take 3 steps forward. This is how you grow. So anyone who thinks that the great company is going to go like this are completely mistaken. It's actually a little bit of this. Long term, you see a rise, but there's going to be short-term periods of, right? And sometimes it's really bad, actually. You're like, man, the sky is falling in your head. Some of these disciplines I really learned the hard way. I used to be, of course, a technical guy. Still am. I still consider myself very technical. And I had this chip on my shoulder that I can vet anyone. But I realized that's just vetting software engineers. Maybe I can ask them a few questions on the board. But how do you ask questions to, let's say, a marketing person, right? I mean, they'll choose it and they'll bring it, right? So the way to even hire people, way to run things, and then the buck stops with the founder, especially the CEO. Anything goes wrong, even though it's not your domain expertise, right? You're responsible for it. So learning to know enough or acquire knowledge fatigue about an area, so you can actually inspect the person and whoever is running the job. If they're not doing it correctly, you should be able to at least tell they're not doing it correctly. There's so many learnings like that. How to manage people, right? I mean, this is not a government job. We've seen, right, when people who are government job, they're kind of stuck, right? So if their boss kind of shouts on them, they can't do much. Here, there's tons of companies. You mistreat an employee, if they're not happy, it takes a minute for them to go elsewhere, right? So how to actually deal with people, keep them happy, keep them productive. It's a learning.
Thank you for sharing. This is an interesting one, and this is the last 3 questions. If I had to ask a group of your friends to describe you, what would they say on the non-work side?
I think one of the things they'll probably say is that I'm nuts to be doing this over and over again. But I think my friends would probably describe me to be very loyal. So I'm a loyal friend. Very high integrity. High integrity has been, my core value for, so no hocus pocus. It's unfortunate. A lot of other companies and founders feel the need to, get lower on their integrity. I don't do that. I don't play that game. I don't do any politics. Yeah. So what you see is what you get. No, I'm not saying things just to please you. I can be direct, but what I'm saying is for your good. So my friend would probably recognize that.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. I have 2 hypotheticals to end with. One is directed towards the fact that if you were graduating IIT Delhi today, you were in India, what would you do? Would you make the decision to still come to the Bay Area, start from here in enterprise, or would you say that, okay, India is the opportunity, you would stay back?
Well, my answers will be somewhat different. I personally gained a lot by doing the PhD.
Okay.
And people actually misunderstand what a PhD means. They like, oh, well, if I want to go to, become a professor, or I will go to a research lab, then I should do a PhD. Actually, that too, but that's not the reason why you do a PhD. See, as students, even if it's a good student, what really the student has done is they know how to acquire knowledge.
Right.
A PhD is about generating new knowledge. You learn how to generate new knowledge.
Right.
It's a very painful shift. People don't realize it. It's very easy to, read what somebody else has already generated. Like Einstein has generated the theory of relativity. Now I can go read the books and I learn what theory of relativity means. But imagine that guy, he spent 18 years trying to come up with that stuff, right? Yeah. It's very painful. Yeah. And even to learn how to do it is even more painful because you never have been taught that before. Yeah. You never have been, okay, you want to generate this new thing in math or this new thing in computer science, right? And so I would actually still do that, even though it takes time and people sometimes are in this rush to make money or what have you, right? I think that's the wrong approach. I've always had the mindset that money comes on the side. You should go behind your passion, and to truly pursue your passion, you need to be able to generate knowledge. And for that, I think PhD is invaluable. So I personally would do a PhD again. Right. And then I will decide, once I've done my PhD, what's next? Should I go back to India to set up shop? Should I do it in the US? Should I go to research, right? Or academia or what have you, right? All those are future decisions. The initial decision is to make that tectonic shift from being able to acquire knowledge to generate knowledge. And I tell both my kids the same thing, by the way. It's amazing. That look, it's their choice, but if they were to take my suggestion, seriously consider a PhD for that reason.
That's amazing. That's a lovely point that I haven't heard on the pod before. So thank you so much for sharing. For the last question, and this is standardized across most of my episodes, we usually go to a point in time in somebody's life which is pivotal. So maybe in your case, or let's say the day you were starting Nutanix, or then you decided to perhaps leave Google. I'd leave that up to you, right?
Sure.
But the benefit of the question is to go back to that time and condense your learnings, and maybe if you have the opportunity to tell yourself something, what would that look like? And by extension, what can be done? So if you can choose a point in time and tell yourself something, and by extension, we can learn what that looks like because of just hindsight experience, I think that'll be great.
Yeah, look, there's the good, there's bads.
Of course,
Right,
yeah. And this is not about regrets at all. This is just
No,
about
this is not
learning.
regrets.
Yeah.
It's all, see, life is not about regrets. Life is about learning.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying that on the podcast, sometimes some of those learnings can be politically incorrect.
Yeah.
Say, right. So without naming specific situations, I'll just try to generalize and
Yes.
say a few. Take a couple of good ones and a couple of not so good ones.
Sure.
So one thing definitely, this one I can name. When I left Google, my family thought I was nuts. My parents, my Google life was just amazing. I used to come home, have lunch at home, then go again. Right? Google had everything taken care of. I was very well respected. And then what the hell is this guy doing? When the world knew about Google and Google was this high flyer, right? Had gone IPO in 2004. I left Google in 2007. So I kind of wrote that IPO. But the way I describe it, and I would never do it differently, the way I described it was that at best, I can make linear jumps in my knowledge and my career if I stay at Google. I would not make quantum jumps, right? And I think by putting myself in an uncomfortable position, I would be actually able to make those quantum jumps because I would be able to learn much more.
Thank you so much, Mohit. I meant everything that I said.
Hello. If you made it this far, you've probably watched the entire episode. And if you've done that, I'm really grateful. I and my team try to put in a lot of effort to ensure that we can bring the best quality content to you. So if you liked the episode, if you watched it thus far, my request to you is to share it with people, to subscribe to the channel, and to ensure that we can keep growing. We are everything and anything only because of you, our listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll keep bringing to you amazing content. Cheers.